Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special bonus episode of Silver Streams, the weekly podcast from the AFI Silver Theater and Cultural Center's programming team. I'm Ben Delgado, the assistant film programmer. For this special bonus edition of the podcast, we will be featuring a Q&A I did with the filmmaking team behind Identifying Features back in September as part of our virtual AFI Latin American Film Festival. Before we get to that, I wanted to briefly run down all of the films opening this week in the virtual screening room. First up, we have My Rembrandt. This new documentary offers a mosaic of gripping stories in which unrestrained passion for Rembrandt's paintings leads to dramatic developments and unexpected plot twists. Next, we have Preparations to Be Together for an Unknown Period of Time. Hungary's official Oscar submission is an encore engagement from our recently wrapped EU film showcase that follows a mysterious love story of a neuroscientist who has recently returned from the US to her native Budapest, giving up a lucrative career to start a new life with the man of her dreams. The only problem is, he claims they've never met. And we have The Salt of Tears. This is the latest from veteran filmmaker Philippe Curel, who once again fashions a pinpoint precise and economical study of young love that gradually blooms into an emotionally resonant moral tale following a provincial youngster who travels to Paris and falls for a girl as soon as he's off the bus in the city of love. And You Will Die at 20. Sudan's official Oscar entry is another return engagement, this from our 2020 New African Film Festival. The stunning feature debut follows Muzamil, a young man who lives in the shadow of an impending death after having been prophesied during his naming ceremony as a newborn to die at the age of 20. And of course, we have Identifying Features, which I mentioned at the top of the show. The film is an all too familiar story for many as we follow a mother in search of her son across the varied and sprawling Mexican terrain after local authorities have proclaimed him dead while trying to cross the Mexican-U.S. border. But she knows deep down that he's still out there and will stop at nothing to find him. This brilliant feature directorial debut won the World Cinema Dramatic Audience Award and Best Screenplay at the 2020 Sundance Film Festival, the Horizons Award at the 2020 San Sebastian International Film Festival, Best Feature Film, Best Actress, and Best Mexican Feature Film at the 2020 Morelia International Film Festival, and the inaugural Best International Feature at the 2021 Gotham Awards. As I mentioned earlier, I had the pleasure of chatting with the filmmaking team back in September when the film was one of our most popular in the virtual AFI Latin American Film Festival lineup. I spoke with director, co-screenwriter, and co-producer Fernanda Valadez and her creative partner, co-screenwriter and co-producer Astrid Rondero. So please enjoy this Q&A for the film Identifying Features, and don't worry about spoilers, as we don't really get into that stuff in this conversation. Well, thank you so much, Fernanda, Astrid. Thank you so much for being here today, and thank you so much for this amazing movie, Identifying Features, Sin Señas Particulares. It's a brilliant, brilliant movie that I saw back at Sundance, and I'm really happy we're able to present it here in the AFI Latin American Film Festival.
Thank you so much for inviting us. We're very happy to be here.
Great. Again, we're happy to have you. We often see the stories of these unfortunately true realities in Mexico and been going on for a while, and they're still going on, stories like this that are very sensationalized and not as nuanced as this. It's really refreshing to see a story take a personal look at a mother's determination. Can you talk about the importance of telling the story from this point of view and contrasting what we normally see in these kinds of films?
I think what we wanted to do since we were writing the script was to approach a story that has this political and social context, but from an emotional point of view. And I believe it's because we didn't want to make so much commentary about the social situation. I mean, of course, what we think it's there, but we wanted to give the audience an emotional approach to the characters and to the situations. I think many times when we see a movie that touches political issues, we don't feel so close to the phenomenon I think it awakens in us interest more than empathy. And I think empathy was very important to us from the very beginning.
Yeah, and it's a very empathetic character that you have from Mercedes Hernandez in the role of Magdalena. Can you talk a little bit about her and her casting and where she came along in the process?
Before the feature film, we made a short film that Astrid produced and I directed. And that film was an exploration of this same story. And on that short film, I found Mercedes, and it was an incredible experience. So when I had the idea that I wanted to make the feature and we began to write the script, then I was convinced that I wanted to have Mercedes again.
But the important thing is that she's an accomplished actress here in Mexico. So she's a professional actress.
A very experienced theater and film actress, yes.
All right, and that actually leads me to my next question. I was going to say she's worked a lot in film and obviously theater, as you mentioned, but there are a lot of non-professional actors in the film as well. How was it working with non-professionals, and how was it for her specifically? Is it something that she's done before, something that you've both done before? Talk a little bit about that, if you would.
I casted two professional actors, Mercedes and David Illescas, who is the boy that plays Miguel. And besides them, the rest of the cast pretty much are non-professional actors. So especially for Mercedes, I do believe it was a little bit difficult for her because we had to work in a non-conventional way. We didn't prepare the character as I would have done otherwise, like to think about the characteristics and in a more mental way, I believe, like I would otherwise do if I had casted professional actors. I had to think about situations and exercises for the non-actors, and then try to communicate with both Meche, Mercedes, and the other actors kind of in the same language. So I believe that was a challenge for me and also for her, because then she couldn't communicate with her fellow actors in the same way as she would have done with a professional actor. I don't know if you would say something about that.
No, I think it was at the end, it turned out to be a very natural way of working. At the beginning for both of them, it was hard, but they found a way. And I think that what was very interesting when we were shooting is that they didn't need to do a lot of things right there in the scene, just like being there. That was the main thing, the main goal, like being able to improvise and react to certain things that were happening right then. And I think that was like a skill that anyway an actor has, and she had just like to focus more on that instead of thinking about rehearsals and other stuff.
Right, it's a way of adapting, and yeah, it works really well working together with all the different people in the film. And the film itself is gorgeous. It looks beautiful. So I wanted to ask you to talk a little bit about working with cinematographer Claudia Becerril, who I believe this is the first time that you all have worked together, if I'm not mistaken. Can you talk about that experience overall and how that came to be? Because it really does look amazing.
I had wanted to work with Claudia for a long time because we graduated from the same school and we knew each other. I have produced a couple of things that she had photographed, but we hadn't worked before as director and DP. And I think Claudia has a mix of characteristics that are very unique because she has experience both in documentary and fiction. So she's very agile and very capable of reacting to the moment when we had documentary scenes, but also she's very creative, especially because we had a very limited budget. So she was very, instead of feeling limited, I believe it was kind of a challenge for her to, okay, we don't have much equipment, then what are we going to do? And it was also a very exciting and interesting conversation of thinking of ways shooting, besides not having a lot of film lights and all that kind of stuff. And she's, besides everything, a great partner and a great companion to have on set. And I believe immediately we find kind of a kinship. And I was very happy working with her.
That's great. And I didn't realize you had gone to the same school. That's really cool. You get to work together in this way. And speaking of your budget, the limited budget, I saw in an introduction that you did a video for, I believe it was the New Zealand Film Festival, that in order to portray the illusion of traveling a lot of different terrains, a lot of different lands, that you all shot in different seasons. You filmed in different times of the year to get that look, as opposed to traveling to those places, but you were mostly in the same area. How did that work out? And is there anything else kind of like that you had to do with your limited budget that you could tell us about?
Well, it was a way of getting the most out of a complete complex situation of not having enough budget. But it was also the result of Fernanda being from that place. She's from Guanajuato, so she really knows how Guanajuato can change throughout the seasons. So it was a very interesting thing to try, and we decided to switch in terms of budget to have more weeks of shooting rather than have like a longer crew or more equipment or whatever. So we got very lucky that we had a crew that were able to work throughout the year for so many days. So it was wonderful well, for me, that was one of those experiences that made me understand in a bigger way how magic the film is, right? Because at some point we were really looking at the frame and we were just like surprised how different it looked just by 2 months, like shooting 2 months apart. So that was one of those things that I think Fernanda was really creative in suggesting to the crew. And well, the other thing was like when we weren't shooting those scenes and we were like traveling, because we also did some stuff in the border. We were a crew of 3 people, like and the actor, yeah. And that was very. I think that was very generous to the film, because that allowed us to capture things that we wouldn't be able to get any other way, like that wonderful shot of Miguel crossing the border, which I think is just one of those scenes for me that show how you can get the most out of a very limited budget.
Yeah, definitely. A beautiful, beautiful scene. So I wanted to ask about if the film itself, I talked a little bit about how, of course, these are real incidents that happen and continue to happen and happen for a while. But was this based on a specific incident of this bus going missing kind of thing, or was it a bunch of things put together? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of things put together, and the challenge at some point was that we wanted to express so much, and we had to limit the story to certain events, so it made sense, kind of like give the events dramatic sense. If that's, I don't know if that makes sense to you, but I think both Astrid and I were really shocked around 2011, 2012, as most Mexicans were at that time, because our perception of Mexico changed quite a lot. And it's not that violence didn't happen before, but it began happening in a scale that was unimaginable up to that point. So I think this film was for us a way to process that violence and to make sense of what was happening around us, and also to pay a homage to the relatives of the victims and of the missing people. By that time, as corpses began to emerge from shallow graves, and as people were disappearing in a scale that we hadn't seen before, the families were, I believe, the representation of hope for many of us, because it was the mothers especially, the determination to find a loved one despite all the violence and despite all the dangers, really, because as it began to happen, many of the relatives, in particular the mothers, some of them were also killed in their search. So we wanted to express that, and this contrast of the violence, but also the endurance and the resilience and the love of the families to their loved ones. And I think this mixture was what motivated us to make this film.
Yeah, and when you were going through this, looking at these different things, is there anything that you saw in your research that really surprised you, that other than, of course, the escalation, seeing that it was happening in so much, but just some kind of thing that you saw along the way that you didn't expect at all, that surprised you?
I think one of the things that up to this day are really obscure and need, of course, research, but also justice, is what happens to the people that go missing. Because what most of us usually think is if a person goes missing, most probably is dead. And that's, of course, an awful tragedy. But many of these victims, before dying, because many of them end up dying, in that curse, they leave stuff that we do not know about, that imply enforced recruitment and people trafficking, and many, it's a humanitarian crisis we don't know much about. And I think that's one of the things as we were researching, we found like the scams where people were being trained to become soldiers of the cartels, or how they were recruited in terrible ways, and kind of a very modern and terrible way of slavery, really. So I think that was one of the phenomena that really shocked us.
Yeah, and so this is your second feature collaboration together. You worked on The Darkest Days of Us, Los Días Más Oscuros de Nosotras, and Astrid, you directed that and wrote that, and Fernanda, you were producing on that. So how was it different this time around, kind of switching those roles, but you both co-wrote the film and produced and even edited the film? So can you talk a little bit about how the two films were different and what the experiences were on this one?
Well, for us, The Darkest Days will always be our first feature. So we were really, well, it was like a big experience for us. It was just like we learned a lot from it. It was completely different because the Mexican fonts changed. So we had much less money for the second feature for identifying features. So we learned a lot of lessons in The Darkest Days, of managing a longer crew, or of doing a film in a more traditional way. And I think that we got a lot of skills of managing a bigger project with that. So when identifying features had a limited budget, I think that previous experience was really, really good for us. So we had everything we needed in terms of confidence, at least, and a little bit of knowledge that at the end this is an uncertain road, and you have to just walk it without fear. So I think that was a wonderful experience, and the differences between the films are complete, those totally different pieces. But they also share, I think, the same view, because at the end, Fernanda didn't get the script. How do you say the script?
The credit?
Yeah, exactly. She didn't get the script credit because of many things. But we are basically the same two working together since that previous film. So we kind of feel like we're doing like films together from the start. For instance, Fernanda's short films, in all short films, I've been there, right? So we're working together all the time.
Yeah, it's great that we found this creative collaboration when we were students. We didn't graduate from the same school, but we found like this kinship, very close creative kinship since we were students. And I think what we realized is that we had to be our own producers so that we had the creative freedom that we wanted. And that's something very unique about Mexico up until now, because now it's changing. We're losing a lot of public funds. But we realized that we could claim those funds for ourselves. And if we saw ourselves as producers, and if we learn how to get those funds, how to get that money to shoot, then we could really do whatever we want. And I think that has been the key. And so since we were doing our graduation short films, Astrid directed and I produced, and then we exchanged roles, and this kind of like interchanging hats, but also being there from the very beginning of the project,
Up to the editing process.
And it's been amazing. And I think at least for me, it makes me feel like we do this together, and so none of us is alone in this road that it's also lonely in a way.
Yeah, it's nice to have a very, I think it's difficult sometimes to find those collaborative relationships that work well, and it's nice when you find that. And I think also you talked a little bit about the budget and how it was much smaller on this project. Were you able to retain some of the same crew you worked with on the first film for this one? And also, can you talk a little bit about why the budget became limited? Was it something that happened in the process, or was it just the story was harder for people to jump on board with?
It was a little bit of those two reasons, because at the time when we were financing, it was the presidential elections here in Mexico. Mm-hmm. So that year also in Cine changed the rules for applying for first feature films. So with our previous film, The Darkest Days, we had like the double. We were able to get the double of the budget. So suddenly they decided that when you were doing your first feature, you didn't need so much money. So they cut the fund for in half. So that was the first blow. It was the first difficulty we found. And later on, we could apply to the tax incentive fund in Mexico, and that was when the topic became a problem, because these are like, how do you say, like companies that they give like their taxes to you mm-hmm. they apply with you to do your film with their taxes. So for them, they felt that this story was really it wasn't a good idea to help us out at that point, especially because of the presidential election. And at the end, it's not that it was like, how do you say it,
censorship.
It wasn't censorship from the government. It's a censorship that has to do with the fear of the companies of doing something that could, something regarding that.
Because it deals with taxes. They are afraid that if they put their taxes and then
something that's against the government,
then the government can retaliate in taxes. So
or something like they think things that in reality won't apply, that doesn't happen. But anyway, you miss the chance of getting the support of a company. So basically what we did was do the film with the money we had, that it was very small amount of money. And that was the reason why we changed crew. And that's one of the things that I think, even now, that these films show to Fernanda and I, that sometimes we work as a sisterhood, and we have our team. Basically, the team is the closest team is the one we had it. But at that time, I think that the film showed us that sometimes it's good for films to change crews, because mm-hmm. there's some characteristics that perhaps the previous DP wouldn't have been able to, how do you say it,
to being able to do without fear.
Exactly, like doing some scenes with a smaller equipment, for instance, and that I think that the limited budget at the end turned out to be like a great lesson for all of us, and it was so important to make the film the way we did it. So we are really, at the end, we feel like it was all the stars aligned together.
It was like a blessing in disguise,
exactly.
I think, because it made us rethink what we wanted to do, and then we came up with these ideas of shoot part of the film in a documentary way, especially the border, and like you asked a little before about using the same spaces but in different seasons. So in the end, we realized our biggest asset was time, and not equipment, and not a more experienced crew. So I had like 9 weeks to shoot the film. And
in Mexico, it's just that's not the typical
amount of time.
Exactly. It's shorter.
So I think that was that made me fortunate, because I had more time with the actors, and we had more time to wait for the right light in terms of the natural light, the sun and the night, the evenings and dawns. So I think that made us rethink how we want to do our next projects, because now I think we will want more time every time.
Yeah. In terms of crew also, right? To pick the right crew for the type of film, and that's something that I think that it's a great lesson for both of us. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Were the crew local to the area? Or they live there, or do they kind of move for the production during, because that's a long shoot, that's a lot of time?
Some of them were local, locations, production, art assistants, the casting director. I think
there weren't some. No. The core of the crew were basically from Mexico City. But the way we shot for such a long time it was that when we had like a regular crew, it was a shorter period. It was like 6 weeks or something like that. Yeah. But the rest of the weeks were just I was doing also the sound recording basically. So we tried to do those scenes more in a documentary style with very few crew.
Mm-hmm. But Claudia, for example, she agreed to move with us for almost 4 months.
Yeah, she was key for that.
Yeah, and that was amazing, because then one day we saw thunder, or a storm, and then we would just grab the camera and let's record, and that was amazing.
Yeah, that's really cool. So the film has premiered at Sundance. And you guys won a couple of awards, which is great. It's really well deserved. The World Cinema Dramatic Award and Best Screenplay Award. But from there, it's gone on to play a lot of other festivals, mostly virtual. Has it had a chance to be screened in Mexico yet? Have people seen it there?
Not yet. It's going to screen in Morelia by the end of October, and we're very happy about that. We, as for now, if the situation doesn't change, it will be a hybrid festival. We will have one physical screening in Morelia and a couple of days of digital screenings. And
later we're going to screen it in Guanajuato, right?
And we are preparing a limited release in Guanajuato shortly after that. So we're preparing.
Yeah, so the crew can see the film because they haven't seen the film, and they are really excited to see it first time.
Oh, that's great. Well, I'm happy to hear that it's in Morelia and going to be in Guanajuato, the place where definitely needs to be seen, of course. So you've talked about working together and how it's a great collaboration, and you're switching roles and things of that nature. Are you going to work on another project? Have you thought about that yet? Are you thinking about the next one and what you guys will do, which one you'll take on, what roles?
Yeah, we're working on it's going to be our third film. I'm going to direct that one. Fernanda is writing with me. We're in the financing process. It's a story about a boy growing up in this scenario, in the cartel scenario, and how he gets away from that and claims a life of his own. We're really happy and very excited. And with our hands full right now. But also Fernanda's writing another script. So basically we're always doing that. Like when she's in the development process, I'm writing, and then she hops in, and then I start the development process, and then she starts writing. So we try to keep on like the wheels turning, so everything is a little bit faster.
Well, that's great. We'll look forward to that one for the festival again. Maybe in a year or two, we'll all be together in person. That would be amazing.
That would be great.
Was there anything else you wanted to mention about the film? I think I could probably keep asking questions, but maybe we should wrap it up here, unless you guys have something you want to talk about.
I just I have to mention that I had a lot of support from my family. And sometimes I don't have the space and time to say that because of the budget, my family had to step in, and they gave us support with the lodgings. We stayed in my family's house, and they were amazing. And of course, that's one of the stuff I don't want to repeat, that I had to ask so much help from my family at my age. But they were really generous, and I think that's something families do.
And for families, I would just want to say that when you're doing a film, it's like an adventure. So your family also want to be part of that adventure. So we were really fortunate that we got the opportunity and that to have a family hopping with us into this journey.
Yeah, and we're thankful to them as well, because they helped get this film so we could have it in the festival and show this great movie. So thank you to your family and to everyone who worked on the film, and to both of you, Fernanda Valadez, Astrid Rondero. Thanks again. Thanks for the film. Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
That wraps it up for this special bonus episode of Silver Streams. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Fernanda and Astrid. I had a great time talking with them about their amazing movie, and hope you get a chance to check it out if you haven't already. We'll be back again next week with a full episode, so be sure to tune in for that. For full details on all of our titles, remember to visit our website at afi.com/silver. And for any feedback or questions, send us an email at silverinfo@afi.com. You can also get in touch with us or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at AFI Silver Theater, and at Twitter at AFI Silver. And as always, music for this episode was provided by Blue Dot Sessions. You can find more of their work on their website, sessions.blue.